everybody.
I can't read them, but whatever.
Okay, go for it.
Good afternoon. Happy Fall Arts Festival weekend for everybody. And it's good to see you. We're here today to talk about how to do things right and how to do things wrong in Marin County government and make things work. You know, I used to say some of us have had the honor of being the mayor of this town, and that the job assignment is one thing: make the town work. Doesn't get more complicated than that. Just make it work. And so sometimes some towns can do it, and unfortunately, as a writer for covers all the towns in Marin County, I can tell you that some don't. And matter of fact, some have lack the excellence that all of us are looking for. You know, very good is good, but poor is not. First of all, tell you a little bit how the program will work. We're going to have some comments from the three of us and John McCauley, who's here, former mayor of Mill Valley, about some of the issues that Mill Valley has faced and handled well. And we're going to be talking about some broader issues, like setting guardrails on bond measures, on what the right way to do things are and the wrong way to do things are, because we have plenty of examples to talk about both. So you're here because people have suggested you to come because you're what's called leaders and opinion makers. And I don't mean to flatter you too much, but that's the truth, because that was kind of the criteria when we picked, and all of us went through the list of who we would invite, because there's a limit to the size of this room, and we are at that limit. Urban, I want to start off by introducing who's going to be up here tonight, and that's Urban Carmel, the mayor, current mayor of the city of Mill Valley. Urban was involved in the Mill Valley Library Foundation. I was just told how much money, and I look at Tom Dicker when I say this, the foundation has, and it's astounding. It's embarrassing for other communities, I want you to know, because they're saying, oh hell, how are we going to do that? Then there's, he was on the Planning Commission, elected to the town council, city council, not the town council, and has the honor, really the honor, of serving as mayor of this community, and is part of the solution that we're going to talk about making communities work right. John McCauley is here tonight. John, where are you? Sitting over in the corner. John has spent his life in the field of numbers. He is, yes, he's showing, yeah, but he is was a Big Five accountant. He has done all sorts of things, including helped the city of Mill Valley do something which many of us thought was impossible, and to get the city's public employee pension program under control. I'm not sure that there's any other municipality or county government than this county that has achieved that significance, but we'll introduce John a bit later. And then Mimi Willard. And Mimi and I talk all the time because Mimi is a spark plug for ideas for columnists. She is the chair or president, or I would say El Supremo. What do you prefer?
President would do.
Or president of the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers of Marin County. The one thing that I want to point out and that you should know is that cost is not your typical old-time taxpayers group, which can only say one word, and that word is no. Sometimes cost says, yeah, we'll take a pass on that, which is usually a pretty good sign. And now occasionally cost will say, we recommend that. A taxpayer group that recommends taxes frugally. Their recommendations are frugal. You have to meet certain criteria. I'm going to be asking you in a few minutes, Mimi, how do you set criteria for things like that? First of all, I'm your friendly newspaper columnist from the Marin Independent Journal. I'm Dick Spottswood, and I had the honor of joining some of the other folks in this room as serving of mayor as your town in the past, long ago. I still live in Mill Valley, so I still have my deep concerns, which we're going to all share in tonight. While I'm starting off the questioning, I'm going to be joining in the discussions, and John McCauley is also going to be feeling free to join in at any time to participate, not just on pensions, but on anything else that we happen to come up with tonight. I'd ask that you do that.
And
when we finish that.
May I give a shout out to a couple of people?
Yes,
here,
please.
Too? Okay, so I want to stand up Kingston Cole. Kingston is on our board of directors. We have a really spectacular board of directors, and Kingston is our experienced political operative and very experienced at running political campaigns. And then I want to also mention Steve Lang, who's on our advisory board, and he's a municipal bond guru. And it's really great for us to be able to go in and visit a jurisdiction or an agency or whatever is thinking about issuing bonds, to talk with them about what would be a good way to do it. And he's also helped us quite a bit in terms of helping set criteria for what's a good bond and a not so good bond. And we've also worked with Mark Chavez. I don't know where you are, Mark. Mark's outside. He lives in Mill Valley, and he and Steve and Urban contributed to our recent reveal of bond guidelines and guardrails, which we hope will set some criteria going forward for greater transparency and fiscal responsibility and accountability in bonds. So that's my.
I'd give a shout out to our audiovisual guru. Tim Amex is here, former president of the Mill Valley Historical Society, I would add. And let's get going. But Urban, I want to start with you. What we're seeking is basically excellence in government, local government. Not going to worry about bigger stuff. If we can do the small stuff, small communities, county, right, we're doing something good. What does excellence in government look like to you? How do you know it when you see it?
So I'd say there's a couple of things. One, so I cut my teeth at McKinsey. That's where I learned my trade. And we have a phrase, I think, that we coined called sticking to your knitting. And sticking to your knitting means doing the things which you are appointed to do. So, for example, in the city of Mill Valley, it would be focusing on local issues, not focusing on global issues. And global issues can be very divisive for people. So we don't get involved in global issues. Number two, funding the things that the city of Mill Valley should be funding. So in comparison to cities around us, we own exactly 8 structures. Those are the 8 structures that we need to actually run our government, like City Hall, the police department, the fire department, so forth. We have been approached in the past to maybe buy the Hub Theater, maybe buy the Bank of America building. Cities around us have gone down that path. So I won't name names, but there's a city very, very close to Mill Valley that owns over 100 buildings. They own restaurants, they own all kinds of things in the city. That's not a good use of city funds. So that's the second thing. I'd say thirdly is really minding your finances and keeping very close touch on what you're spending your money on and planning ahead. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Measure L, which is an infrastructure initiative that we have in our city government. The only reason we can talk about Measure L, which is really about reducing risk in our city, it's because prior city councils, prior city governments, going back generations, have taken care of business in the city of Mill Valley. So, Dick, when you were on the city council, we did great things like create the Depot Plaza, right? Successive generations created the community center and all of our playing fields. They created our public library. They expanded our public library. They redid Miller Avenue. They got on top of our pension costs in our city. They got on top of our healthcare benefits in our city. They've done a lot of work. They took care of a lot of business. Measure L is this council's contribution to that process of taking care of business and handing off our city to the next generation in better shape than what we got it in. And what we're trying to accomplish now is to get on top of the risks that we've got, primarily the fire, flood, sea level rise risk that we've got in our city. That's primarily what Measure L is about. Do you mind if I say a couple of words about Measure L while I'm talking?
Sure, or we're going to come back and actually talk specifically about Measure L very shortly too, though.
Yeah, so Measure L, very simply, is a 1 cent sales tax increase in the city of Mill Valley. That's all it is. It is specifically for infrastructure. It doesn't go to pensions, it doesn't go to labor, it doesn't go towards programs at the library or swim classes or anything else. It only goes towards hard assets in the city of Mill Valley, specifically reducing risk. Like I said, fire, flood, landslides, those kinds of things, replacing roofs, replacing HVAC systems that are end of life. That's all that it's about. And let me just, if you don't mind, I'd like to read a few quotes that have been said about Measure L. And we can see if we can identify who said these things. So here's one. The city council and the city manager are exceptionally responsible and can be trusted to spend money efficiently and on the promised priorities. We hope Mill Valley will serve as a model for other cities and agencies in Marin. Oh, Mimi Willard said that. Oh, that was so nice of you to say that. Here's another one that's really good. The city checked all the boxes, including a 10-year sunset, a comprehensive list outlining each project with specific funding designated, plus a public oversight committee. Who would have said something like that? Dick Spottswood, yes. And finally, as a Chamber of Commerce, we don't take a sales tax increase lightly. The Mill Valley business community will benefit significantly from sales tax measure and proposed investments in our community. You have our full support. Who would have said that? Paula Reynolds? Thank you very much. So that's what's been said about this initiative. It has the endorsement of 10 former mayors, the Marin Realtors Association, a number of civic leaders. How did we get to that point that it was so well established that an organization like the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers, which is not known for necessarily endorsing things, but actually
getting more known for that.
Okay, well, that's very good. So what we did in our city government is we started on this process 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we started cataloging all of the potential risk points in our city. The roads, the landslide risks, the flooding risks, the buildings that needed to be updated. We spent 4 years bringing all that together. Then last year, before we got too far down the road, we met with Mimi and went through everything that we were talking about. We met with Dick and went through everything we were talking about. And we presented our plan. And guess what? We had done our homework about what they had written about and what they had looked for. So we put in, for example, a 10-year sunset into the provisions for the sales tax. So it takes no action by anybody to remove this sales tax. It will sunset automatically in 2034. That's the end of it. Secondly, by council resolution, it has to go only towards infrastructure. It cannot go towards anything else. Thirdly, it has to be additive. It has to add to the existing resources that we've got. So in other words, you can't pass a tax that puts money, new money into the city government and then take some of the existing money that you've already got from taxpayers and use it in some other way. No, it has to be additive. It actually has to increase the level of investment that we can make in our community. And finally, it needs to have an oversight committee that's got real teeth. Like people that can actually opine upon what you've spent the money on, look at the reports, and give you an opinion about what you should be spending money on in the next year. That's how we designed it. Those were things that we had understood that you were all interested in a successful bond fund or a tax measure, and that's what we did. And we went out and we designed it that way. The last thing that we did is we went out to voters with a survey, and we asked them, hey, you've got two ways of funding. First of all, we've got an idea. Do you want to fund infrastructure? And the overwhelming response was yes. We believe that that's a good use of city resources. Then we asked them how, and we gave them two alternatives. One was a transfer tax, so you tax the transfer of real estate. Very progressive tax, impacts very few households every year. The other one is a sales tax, impacts everybody who goes shopping in the city of Mill Valley. We went into it thinking transfer tax. Went into it thinking that's how we were going to go about funding this. No, the survey clearly showed that taxpayers would only support a sales tax increase, but they would support it overwhelmingly. It would pass, and that's what we went with. We put aside what we thought we were going to do, and we pivoted to the strategy that was going to work. That's how we ended up where we are today.
I would just, participating in this, I would add the word credibility is crucial. I've sat through a number of Fairfax Town Council meetings, and I was there when they did the polling on the Fairfax, reported the results of the polling on the bond in Fairfax. And the reasons, one of the prime reasons that the tax was iffy was the public's lack of confidence in the town council carrying out reliably what they promised to do. That's lack of credibility. attend Novato meetings occasionally and write on Novato. And Novato has a problem in that at present they do not have up-to-date audited financial statements. Now, not only does
But they want a tax that lasts forever.
Yes, but yes. There's no audited financial statements. Every other of the 10, there's 11 municipalities in Marin, 10 managed to have audited financial statements. It's not impossible. They say we can't find sufficient accountants. Now, I'm aware of the state of California having a plethora of accountants, but they claim that's been the part of the delay. They can't find an accountant to do it. Well, nobody really accepts that. Therefore, lack of credibility. So I pay credit to Mill Valley, but I want to focus on that term, credibility. You have to earn credibility, and you earn credibility by doing things and delivering. If you have a contractor, it's the same deal. The contractor that did the job as promised and paid for, and you like it, you're going to recommend that person to friends and hire them again. If they didn't, that's it. Mimi, what do you think good government represents? How do you know it when you see it?
Well, there are a number of aspects of this. One of them is that it is transparent. And there are a lot of local governments that fall down at that very basic criterion. Being fiscally responsible. I've had some good conversations with Urban about this recently. For example, Mill Valley has done a very good job in terms of outsourcing or consolidating with other districts certain types of overhead that can be very expensive, like dispatch for emergency responders. Other districts aren't doing that. So those are a couple of things. I think also being very reaching out and inclusive to the community in terms of making sure that they have their finger on the pulse of what the community wants. And then I would also say focusing on the basic essential requirements of the job. Don't get mission creep into all kinds of things that are costly or divisive or really aren't part of your basic function of providing city services.
One way that you get credibility is you do the impossible. And John McCauley did the impossible, or was part of the team that did the impossible. John, I'm going to ask you to explain how you did the impossible, which is turning around a statewide disaster for most municipalities and helping your town get out of the hole.
So it always takes 5 to do anything, so let's make it clear this was a council activity. So the story of employment in the public sector, you start your job at 20, you work till 65, you get a pension to age 90. It's a really long story. The good news is that my comments will not be that long. Okay? All right? So there's 2 things. There's a pension and there's what we call OPEBs. You hear that term all the time. OPEBs means other post-employment benefits. And what it means in plain English is that health care is provided in retirement. Okay? So think back to the 1950s and 1960s. We had Ozzie and Harriet, you know, we had Fathers Knows Best. You had single families work for the same company their whole lives. They got a pension. They went to it went for the rest of their life. Then the 70s and the 80s came around, and we had All in the Family, and we had Mary Tyler Moore and all that. Everything changed, right? But that promise was still there. The pension promise was always well understood and was well financed. Healthcare was just tossed in. It was really inexpensive. It wasn't something that anyone paid attention to. Mid-80s come around, and all of a sudden, the financial regulators, the Financial Accounting Standards Boards, takes a look and says, man, this healthcare stuff's getting really expensive. Instead of just paying our bill every year, we need to tell the public the future obligation that companies have when they've made this now very expensive benefit. If you think back in those days, anyone remember Lotus 123 back in those days? Company in Cambridge, right? They had all young people. They didn't have any health care in retirement. And then you'd have, say, General Motors, okay? General Motors had a huge retirement obligation. The accounting people said, measure this. At that time, and an analyst said, wow, I just realized that General Motors is actually a healthcare providing company that makes a couple of cars. That's how expensive it was, right? So that's the background that brings us to Mill Valley. Mill Valley had a very generous post-employment benefit for their employees. It was better than most other cities, more expensive than most other cities, and we paid everybody the same thing because nobody was paying attention, okay? So in about 2016, some focus was given to that, and they said we need to do something different about this, right? And this was at the same time that the pension issue was going on around the state. So Governor Brown signed a thing called PEPRA, which Public Employees something retirement something thing. And what it did is it lowered the pension promise for new employees. At that moment, the city said we need to lower our health care promise that we're making to our new employees, and that was the first step that happened, the council did at that time. So they then had 2 tiers of promise. Then the question became, should we start funding this? Should we start spending money? Because if you put money in the bank, it earns money. Ultimately, your costs become less, right? So that process began discussion, but nothing was done. A little more time goes by. It proceeded further. It got more serious. Eventually, a subcommittee I was on looked at various alternative choices for how to make investments. A decision was made in terms of where to put the money. And a discount rate was decided, and eventually we began paying money into these programs. And then the story gets a little bit better because at one point we said we can't afford this anymore. So all new employees, you do not get this benefit in the future. So it was a combination of reduction of benefits and funding and making the hard decisions which we had to negotiate with our union groups that resulted in the movement forward. So how do we do? In 2016, we had a liability of $31 million for future health care costs. $31 million, that is a big number for our town. And we had assets of around $8 million, okay? So, you know, we were basically short $23 million that needed to be funded prospectively. All these steps are taken and are put in place. The first thing that happened was because new people were not earning any benefit, this number of 31 million would have normally grown 10 million to $41 million. Instead, it became smaller because you start work, you retire, and what happens at the end? You don't get any more health care benefits because you're not around anymore. So things are starting to turn, where the gross costs are going down. The city was making these investments each year, right? Money makes money. We chose a passively managed, very low cost, 10 basis points if you're into the investment world. It was 50% equity, no, 40% equities, 50% debt instruments, 10% alternative investments. Very conservative, very stable. And what happened was our gross liability went from 31 million to 29 million. Our assets went from $8 to $16 million. And as a result, we cut our obligations in half only over 6 years because the city went forward and paid a lot of attention to this. So that's pretty much what that story is.
John, first of all, just as a comment, Mill Valley, I've got my mic right here. The Mill Valley is fortunate in some ways in that the citizenry is loaded with talented people. I mean, I remember sitting in the audience, listening to you talk about pension plans, and I said, what do they need a consultant for? They got one on the council that knows what they're doing. That's an unusual situation. My question is, how come other cities aren't doing the same thing with their huge, substantially and increasing pension and healthcare benefit obligations? Why aren't they mimicking what's been done here?
So I want to call out a friend of mine, a guy named Larry Chu. Larry was in Larkspur, on council in Larkspur. I came on towards the time he was coming off. Larry wrote about a 50 or 60 page document with the MCCMC, the Marin County Council of Mayors and City Council members, or as my wife called it, the MMMM. And all the electeds got together monthly. He wrote this very extensive document, and the purpose of it was to take somebody who is not an accountant, who's maybe a lawyer, who maybe is a business owner, doesn't know a lot about this, and give them the basic information to understand how this works. right? He wrote that paper. I came on. We updated it, and we also included other post-employment benefits to it, and we made a series of recommendations. This was one of those recommendations. We had others, particularly the need for a 10-year budget, which I'll talk about later if you ask me. It's really an important issue. And we also put a lot more sunshine on the costs of healthcare and the cost of benefits. I spent my whole life doing financial statement audits. I worked with some of the largest companies in America. I can read financial statements. I find government financial statements very difficult to understand, all right? So there's a rule. You have to have certain things in your financial statements. You can also add other data if it is true and relevant. Mill Valley has a footnote to their financial statements that nobody else has, that we recommend that everybody else has. I looked it up this morning. I was glad to see it was still there. And what it shows, here it is right here, what it shows is the amount of money we spend on salaries and wages and the amount of money we spend on benefits. Most financial statements say library or Department of Public Works or police, fire, whatever. It's the service and not the cost separated between payroll and overhead and all those other elements like paying for roads, right? Mill Valley's doing that now. We recommended all the other cities do it. Maybe somebody who has got a voice in the IJ could remind the others that that's still out there. Just to put a sense on it, in Mill Valley, last year we had $17 million of payroll paid to our excellent employees. We also had $10 million of other costs. A lot of that's catch-up from the old years when pensions weren't funded, so it's not current employees only. However, to put that in perspective, it's almost 60 cents. For every dollar of payroll, the city is spending 60 cents to catch up on its obligations for pension and health care and also provide current service. This stuff is expensive, and we all should know it. It helps the cities make their decisions about how they budget. To understand, you give somebody payroll, you're going to be giving them benefits also.
Well, one thing that we do at the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers is that we do a fair amount of oversight in formal ways and in informal ways. In the formal ways, we have members of our board and others who are associated with us who serve on citizen oversight committees. Kingston is one of the eager beavers who serves on several of these. That's, yes. And I'd like to talk about wildfire if we can at some point.
Right now.
But let me come back to that. I'll answer your question. And then when we are looking at something in particular that's happening in a city or an agency, then we will take a good deep dive into the audited financials and the budgets and so on to see if they are in a position to be able to deliver the things that they are supposed to deliver or promising to deliver. And besides myself, one of the other members of our board are people who have been financial professionals. So we do that. And then there's just a whole lot of blocking and tackling in terms of attending meetings and listening to and watching the videos and just making sure that we are seeing issues as they evolve. And then we also have a lot of ongoing conversations with leadership and people in the community. Kingston has something to say.
Yeah, one of the things you sort of left out was we negotiate.
Yes.
We go in and we sit down, whether it's with Tam Union or someone else, and we say, these are our guardrails, these are the things that we need. Right. Lay it out for them, show them what it is, and see what we, sometimes, for instance, on open space, Measure A, we went around and around with it. We didn't think we got enough for wildfire prevention, enough specific language. But we worked out a compromise. We're willing to work with you. We're not going to take a doctrinaire approach. We're not going to say, you got to give us 3 things or else. Very often,
so in that instance, we wanted more money in the Measure A renewal. This is the county Open Space and Parks Fund. We wanted more money in there for wildfire prevention, because as you probably know, the county open space is chock-a-block full of tinder for fire. And we initially were successful in getting the staff to get behind us and to recommend to the Board of Supervisors a reallocation of funds, taking some away from the ranchers and putting more into the open space. But then we didn't win at the lobbying war. And so that kind of got backpedaled. And so then we worked with Gabe Paulson in, Larkspur. Yeah. And he served as an intermediary to negotiate a compromise in which there was specific language in the final resolution that said essentially there will be, X amount more of essentially boots on the ground that will get more of that vegetation removed. So that's a great example of how the system works. We also, I think, just a quick thing that needs to be said, which comes out of what Kingston was just talking about. We have a well-defined and well-publicized set of criteria, and they are posted on our website, and they are called our sensible tax criteria. And entities like Mill Valley Council and the city manager know to look at them when they are thinking about doing, for example, a tax measure. And so our criteria say things like, first one is, it's got to be necessary. So you have to qualify as necessity. It has to be as affordable and fair and transparent as possible. And then we go into some detail about how you meet those criteria. And then this year, for the first time, together with our partners in Mill Valley, we put together something similar to that for bonds, where it has become increasingly apparent that many agencies and jurisdictions use bonds kind of like a slush fund. It's a giant pool of money for 30 years that they can do anything they want, and they have kind of a tissue of oversight after the fact, and not a whole lot of power in these oversight committees. And we made a number of recommendations to try to improve the disclosure of what's in a bond measure when it goes on the ballot, improve the oversight, improve the accountability. So those are some of the kinds of things that we do.
Maybe I'm going to bring up something you said there that leads me to advance a question I was going to ask on guidelines.
Yes.
There's been an issue in Greater Mill Valley about the the desire, let me put it directly, of the Mill Valley School District to move the middle school to the site of the Friends of the Field, the athletic fields for kids.
Yes.
The money from that comes from Measure G, which was a facilities tax bond for the school district, and said in their arguments for it, we're going to spend the money on X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Moving the middle school was not X, Y, or Z, and the district, I understand, says, well, we're not bound by that anyway. Am I correct?
Yes, you are, but could I let Mark Chavez answer this question?
Yes, sure.
Here you go, Mark.
Well, you hear what I was asking? Yeah. But then, and the fundamental question is, how do we create guardrails in the future so that we know what we're going to get when we pass something?
So there's a cautionary tale for our community.
Loudly enough that they can hear you outside, too. Okay.
For our community with respect to Measure G. And that is, it all has to do with the legal rules that apply. As you might remember, the bond question, the question that people voted on, was whether we should give the school district $194 million to upgrade classrooms, science labs, and learning technology in Mill Valley elementary and middle schools, and repair, replace leaky windows, improve accessibility for students with disabilities, and add solar. Now, I think it's really important to understand that that was the question we approved. A year and a half later, we found ourselves in a position where the school district had gotten to the point where it was considering approving a proposal to demolish Friends Field and construct an entirely new middle school on the site of Friends Field, even though nothing in the bond measure referred to that demolition. It was not listed as a specific project, and the construction activities related to the middle school were all tied to the current site. The reason that they were able to do that, were they able to consider that, is because bond issuers take the position that the ballot question is legally irrelevant. It does not constrain their activities. And this is a point that goes to the importance of the safeguards that are built into bond measures, because this particular bond measure had a fairly expansive couple of paragraphs at the end in this general terminology, which the school district took the position granted them sweeping authority to alter the nature, scope, and location of any of the specific projects that were listed. So even though voters thought they were approving a list of specific projects, if you consider the implications of those words, nature, scope, and location, it becomes readily apparent that essentially the school district had rather expansive authority to do as it pleased. And in fact, during this entire dispute, at one point, a member of the school board waved that language in front of the public and said, basically, we could do whatever we want. So I think the lesson here, how it relates to local tax measures and bond measures, is that you do have to have guardrails built into the bond measure itself. You have to have effective oversight as opposed to the kind of what Mimi referred to as tissue oversight. And you have to have responsible.
And pre-approval was the other thing that you contributed to that.
Yeah.
If you could say that in the mic.
Yeah, you have to have responsible leadership and pre-approval of expenditures. Otherwise, it's too late.
You know, I'd add one thing that I said earlier about credibility. It just seems to me that when an agency says what we said in the bond measure doesn't apply, the next time you come around the pike and want some money, you don't have the credibility anymore. I mean, you did not deliver on what you promised. And that, earning credibility, I have the pleasure, we have a wonderful grand jury in this county. And one of the things I tell the grand jurors every year, I give them a class every year, is you've earned credibility in this county. The grand jury have. Don't lose that credibility. It's the most invaluable thing you have. And I think for the city of Mill Valley or the city of Larkspur or the city or the county of Marin or a school district, Spottswood Marin City School District, we're going to talk about them.
Yep.
Building credibility is important. The gentleman over there had a question?
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for doing this forum this evening. I've talked to a lot of people about this new increase in tax, and mostly have received negative feedback. However, when I talked with Mimi a few weeks ago, and you were supportive, I was like, wow, because we work closely together on some pretty interesting projects. And then when I heard Ken Broad was behind this and getting this group together, that was extremely meaningful to me, and frankly to my family and other friends. That you guys respect the quality of management in the city, and that the thought process has been such that it be supportive to what we want to achieve. So now I think the question is, I think we're hopefully all convinced, I'm convinced, that this is a good thing. How do we get the word out? Because I think it needs some help. And then tell us what to do. And thank you for your service.
And I'm going to let Urban say more about that, but I just want to point out that Jed Smith is on the water board, and he was part of a new wave of new directors who came in to ensure that we will be able to turn on the tap and have water come out in the future. And while that's a costly endeavor, Our organization was highly supportive of the new candidates, and we think that Jed and his colleagues are doing a fabulous job. And I think one of the things that can be done here, Jed, is for people like you who have tremendous credibility in the community to get out there and throw your support behind it. I'll turn it over to Urban if you have more to say on this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think in our community, we're quite lucky. I mean, this group that's here with us today, you are the key opinion leaders. You are among the key opinion leaders in the city. And that's how decisions in the city are frequently made. That's how elections are decided in the city. This city is different than other ones. We listen to each other. We listen to our friends. We listen to our neighbors. We're not persuaded as much by advertising or traditional media, but we are highly persuaded by when our friends recommend something to us, when our neighbors recommend something to us. We've seen that over and over again. So advocacy on the part of people like Jed, like part of everybody here, is really an important part of how we ensure that this passes. I'd like to make if you don't mind.
You should mention he's a member of the Water Board.
What's that?
He's a member of the Water Board.
He is a member of the Water Board, and the Water Board is better for it as a consequence, right? So.
I happen to know the treasurer of the Yes on No Valley Measure L, me. Okay, and we have this great web page called yesformillvalley.com. If you are inclined to make a contribution, we would very much appreciate it, because we're kind of halfway there in terms of our fundraising. In order to get the word out, this is a negative period of time with regards to people's interest in more taxes, but as somebody who's extremely conservative with regards to the public's money, I'm 100% convinced, and I think Urban did a great job of saying why, but they say that money is the mother's milk of politics, so perhaps, and some of you have already been very generous in this room, I'm looking at some over there, if anybody else has an interest in it, go to our webpage, you can click and put some cash in there quite easily.
Yeah. So we have been, transparency I think is really important for us. So we have been very transparent about this entire process. On Monday, we had an open house at City Hall. Anybody could come in, ask questions about it. We gave a presentation about it. We were there for an hour and a half answering questions about this tax measure. Carolyn Joachim is in the audience. She has been leading our effort to do neighborhood chats. That's her effort to go around to every corner of our city and talk about what's on people's minds and to also answer their questions. That's how we try to go out and try to inform people as much as we can. For those of you who are interested, and I hope that's all of you, we have, and I might just say this modestly, we have a very entertaining, it's only like 5 or 6 minute long video where people like me and Todd Cusimano and people that were on our infrastructure study committee talk very eloquently about why you should support this measure and what it's going to be used for. It's a very easy way to get up to date on what's going on with this measure.
I'd like to mention.
Do you mind if I want to just riff on a couple of things that you guys have been talking about with respect to good governance, right? So, yeah, so good governance. So I don't like John, I am very fiscally prudent. And I do not like the idea of taxing and spending without making other accommodations to increase your ability to fund things. And what I mean specifically about that is like tightening the proverbial belt. And I really want to strike home how much tightening we are planning to do and we have already done in the city. So we consolidated over a many-year period. We did the consolidation of our fire department into Southern Marin Fire. And that's got huge operational improvements, but guess what? It's got huge financial advantages as well. Every year going forward, we will save $350,000 as a consequence of doing this consolidation. That's a significant amount of money. We are not stopping there. There are a number of our departments that can be consolidated, combine them together. And when we combine those together, we'll be able to extract, we believe, another $600,000 in annual savings. So you combine those two together over the next 10 years, that's $10 million.
How many miles of roads would that pave?
That would pave a lot of roads. That's a lot of money. Yep. So our municipal services tax is $2 million, right? So just to give you a comparison, so we're almost, increasing it by 50%. So by doing that, so it's very significant money. John and I are when he was on the council, and all hell was breaking loose following the pandemic. In 2021, when financial markets had basically collapsed, interest rates had collapsed, we were not sitting around wondering what was going to happen next. Our finance committee convened. We had 3 bonds. We refinanced 2 of them. We lowered the interest rate on those by 50%. That's a $200,000 a year savings. And we were able to extract over $4 million by extending the duration on one of those in order to pay for East Blythedale. We would not have been able to fund East Blythedale without doing that. So we were thinking about it. We're trying to extract all the efficiencies that we possibly can out of our ability to manage our own finances, and it makes a big difference. So you add all these sources together, that's a lot of tightening of our belts that we're trying to accomplish in order to accomplish our goals. So it's not just a matter of raising revenue all the time. And I think that's one of the things that you ought to be looking at when you're looking at how well cities are managed. Are they really doing all the efficiencies? So one of our initiatives next year, I think, is going to be to really put together some informative ratios for anybody, even with people without a financial background, to understand what we're doing in our city government and for us to manage what we're doing with our expenses. So for example, we always want to ensure that our labor component, which as John says is the largest component of our finances, remains at least stable. You do not want to have that eat into your revenues, because every time you do that, you reduce your ability to invest in your community, you reduce your ability to provide services to your community. So that's a particularly important ratio that we need to follow. But there are many of these things that we need to look at. We're going to lay that out into a nice, easy to understand way so that everybody can do this. And we're hoping that's going to be a model for other cities. So other cities can,
hope so too.
can communicate out to their population and to people like Mr. Spottswood about what they're doing with their city, so that they understand the finances in an easy way.
You mentioned the Southern Marin Fire Protection District as an efficiency. Certainly, consolidation in this county is a big issue. Just want to acknowledge Mill Valley's representative on the Southern Marin Fire District Board, former Mayor Clifford Waldeck. Now, when you see a fire, call Clifford at home. He'll be out there right away. They've given him a fire extinguisher, and you're ready to go. Sometimes I have a chance to see places where they don't do things right. This isn't just about Mill Valley. It's try to create a template for other communities to learn how, and urge them, educate them on how to run a place better. Novato, it's easy to write about 2 towns in this county, Novato and Fairfax. Fairfax is God's gift to colonists. Let's just accept it as that. But Novato, they have a tax on the ballot this year. It's a forever tax. There's no sunset. After 10 years, theoretically, it comes back to the council. The benefit of a sunset is if the council still needs money, it has to go to you, the people, to say yes or no. Did we do a good job? If we didn't, forget about it. And they don't have a list of what they're going to do. Just a general, like 3 or 4 sentences of general public infrastructure improvements. Mill Valley has a list with a dollar amount associated with each list. And there's an independent expenditure committee, but more importantly, interested citizens, the press, the grand jury, can go look and say, you guys said that's transparency. And for the life of me, I can tell you that people in Novato advocated for that transparency. It's not as if it didn't happen by accident. And it's our job to point out when they do something wrong, and it's our job to point out when they do something right. That's the risk, that's the reward, chicken and egg, the press's job to do. But it's the citizens' job as well. And if they're not delivering, vote no.
So I would just like to mention that the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers is opposing the Novato sales tax because of the forever aspect of it, and because they don't have audited financials that are up to date, and because they have a history of spending on non-essential things like loans to outside entities, and because they have so many properties, unlike 8 in Mill Valley, that they own, that they've actually lost track of them, according to the grand jury, how many they own. And of course, there's maintenance that goes in that as well. But the other thing I want to point out is that we, and Kingston actually is helping lead this, are working with some citizens in Nevada who feel strongly about this, and we're kind of showing them the ropes and guiding them as they try to run their own campaign to save their city from a debacle, including a two different periods former mayor who is helping spearhead this. So it's been kind of fun to work with another city and see people get involved and you know, do what they got to do to make sure things come out right there.
Urban, there's a measure coming up on the November ballot, the state ballot, called Measure 5. And Measure 5 is going to change the, if passed, will change the threshold of approval needed in tax measures. You have described, I think I used the word here when we were talking about junk taxes, that will proliferate. Please expand.
So Proposition 5 is on your ballot for November. Proposition 5 is a change in the state constitution which lowers the threshold for passing bonds in your jurisdiction. So presently you need a 66% 2/3 majority in order to pass a new bond. Those bonds
If it's not a school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those bonds end up on your property tax bill, right? That's that long list of things after your property assessment, that long thing that adds up to as much to your property assessment. So it'll lower it from 66% to 55%. And that will obviously probably spur a number of new bonds that will be coming to you. Do you want me to provide some context from my perspective at least? So, you know, I think what you've heard here tonight is that you've got jurisdictions that are responsible and you've got jurisdictions that perhaps need to learn more about responsibility or have better guidelines for how they pass new tax measures. You know, if Prop 55 were city specific, you know, I would say that I trust our ability to pass a tax effectively, that we would manage well. I think the problem that you're going to run into is that what we're seeing now, I think for the first time, are regional propositions. So you might be familiar with Regional Measure 4, previously known as BAFA, which is the Bay Area Housing Financing Authority. This was a $20 billion bond that was going to be on your November ballot. And that's a 9-county bond. That's a bond that's going to be, needs to be passed by all 9 counties, and it's going to provide funding for all 9 counties. $20 billion is a lot of money over 30 years, and as I think one of the great...
53 years.
53 years, yes.
53 years.
So Mimi, one of the great things that I've learned from Mimi, or that she has reminded me of, that I think is really important, I think a lot of people didn't think about, and it came up with respect to Measure A, which is that you have the face value of a bond, and then you've got what's called the par value of the bond. And the par value of the bond is the face value plus the coupon. And every bond has got a coupon. The coupon is the interest rate that goes associated with it. And that coupon is real money. And the coupon is not something else. So $20 billion is the face value of the bond.
And the total number that the taxpayers would be liable for is $48 billion.
Yeah, so it's a significant increase, and that needs to be paid by somebody, and that somebody is all of you. And that really reduces the effectiveness of the tax measure because you're paying somebody to hold that bond, and that's how finance works. Somebody needs to take the risk in order to hold that bond. But it also becomes a very expensive way of raising taxes. One of the reasons why we immediately in our steering committee, when we were looking at how we were going to fund infrastructure in our city, we immediately eliminated all options having to do with parcel taxes and ad valorem taxes. We just didn't feel like anybody had the appetite for more taxes on their property bill already. So we immediately went away from those things. So I think the issue coming up with Prop 5 is that things outside of your control, outside of the city of Mill Valley, might end up on your property tax bill if Prop 5 is passed. One that's top of mind, at least for me, is one having to do with transportation. So transit agencies are having a difficult time in the post-COVID world finding enough funds in order to run their operations, because their operations are run primarily on revenue from taxes as well as tolls. So if you're not driving into the city, you're not getting the same toll revenue, and then the fare box. And if you're not riding transit, well, then you're not contributing to the operation of the transit. The thing is, if you do a 9-county transit bond to fund it, how much transit do we have in Marin County? We have in Mill Valley the number 17 bus that I'm aware of, and not very much else. That we have very limited transit opportunities. There's not very much transit in the county of Marin, and so you'll be paying for things like BART and for Caltrain, things that are outside of your county. And that's not the way, and Dick probably should explain this more, but that's not the way transit is typically funded. Transit is typically funded by the agency or the jurisdictions in which it exists. So if you live in a jurisdiction with BART, then you pay for BART. If you don't live in a jurisdiction like Napa or Sonoma or Marin, then you don't pay for BART directly through your property taxes. So those are the things to watch out for, I think, with that.
I just want to say on transit, which is kind of my field, the problem is that things in life have changed after the pandemic. It's just the reality of life. And the way people move has changed. But the employment situation, the folks who provided the agencies, BART particularly and Muni particularly, of those two, they don't need as many people because they're moving less people. And that's not, in some sections, popular. I can tell you a very personal, not to myself, but to a person I know well, Sonoma County Director of the Golden Gate Bridge District, and I'll give you the similar story in Marin County. The Golden Gate Bridge General Manager, Dennis Mulligan, decided that with the pandemic, they needed to cut the number of routes. The number of routes on the number 4 that comes through Mill Valley has drastically decreased because the patronage decreased. You fit the routes to the patronage. And so he asked the board the permission to do that. The finance chairman was Brian Sobel from Sonoma County. The labor unions went to the Sonoma Board of Supervisors, and they had the supervisors dump Sobel from the guard, solely because he supported that reasonable action. The good news, they tried the same stunt in Marin County with Patty Garbarino, who's our director, independent director for the Bridge District. Labor has more effective force in Sonoma County. Patty easily withstood that challenge and is still on the board today because she did the right thing by supporting a movement to right size. But in areas like BART and in Muni, that doesn't happen. They're going to run empty transit vehicles, and you're going to pay for it if you have a Bay Area-wide transit tax. That's not good. I want to go to Mini, just one quick question, Mini, and we're going to do some questions too. Yeah. But your organization, you've spoken up over the years on a number of school district taxes, but this year in the Sausalito Marin City School District, not only are you not opposing it, it's a school tax. It's the only one I think this year that you're supporting. Why? What did they do different that earn your support than, say, Kenfield?
Okay. Could I just add something to the last? Okay, I just want to finish the last topic of Prop 5. So, Proposition 5, by reducing the threshold to pass new bonds from 2/3 to 55%, is unleashing, we believe, a tax tsunami. Because among other insidious aspects of this proposition, it is effective simultaneously with the November election. So any bond measure at the local level that goes on the November ballot, if Prop 5 passes, suddenly the threshold to pass it also dropped. And this already has been causing kind of a pre-tsunami, so to speak, the first little wavelet, and so that bond proposals that aren't polling very well are emboldened to go forward and throw their chips in onto the November ballot, and that clearly is the case with the Fairfax road infrastructure bond, which did not poll well. And they just said, we're going to go ahead anyhow and give it a shot. So just imagine if this passes, and that was also the theory behind Regional Measure 4, which we just talked about, which was the $20 billion bond that would cost $48 billion and go on for 53 years. And we call that the unaffordable housing bond because it was messed up in so many different ways, and it was going to cost $1 million a unit to build a one-bedroom apartment, and would require all kinds of subsidies afterwards to keep people in those houses that weren't covered by the bond. So just incredibly layers and layers and layers of cost. Point being that if Prop 5 passes, this is going to be a very, very major challenge to affordability throughout the state, because there will be more and more kind of not very well thought through, not very popular junk type things that end up on ballots pretty much everywhere.
Sausalito, Marin City.
Sausalito, Marin City. So Sausalito, Marin City, we have worked with on what we think is a necessary and fair proposal for a parcel tax for their school district. And the school district is struggling to be able to afford to continue to employ the number of teachers that they need to do a good job, and to keep those teachers from being poached into other districts that can pay more. And they worked with us to come up with, so they passed the necessity criterion on our sensible tax criteria. Our problem with school parcel taxes, and the reason that we have butted heads with a lot of school districts in the past, is that they've been set in their ways and they have insisted on using what we'll call a flat parcel tax, under which if you're a teacher's aide living in a studio condo, you're paying the same amount of tax per parcel as the mall, as a mansion, as a 200-unit apartment building. It's extraordinarily punitive. So we worked with the Marin, with the county and all the different districts in the county, fire districts. This is a little segue. I won't go into all the details, but we worked to help come up with a compromise solution for a fair tax that helped establish the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And we believe that we were singularly instrumental in having that happen, because we got resistance at the county to having a fair tax that had an appropriate sunset, and we got resistance at the county. We went around to all the different fire agencies and cities within the county, and we got them behind our proposal for a 10-year sunset of the tax, similar to the fight that we're having right now in Novato. And once the cities and the different fire agencies came along behind us and said, we won't join the new authority unless it's got this sunset, the county had to do it, and we endorsed it, and we think it's been a success. We think it's one of the great things that's happened in the county.
To give you a credit for being behind the scenes and doing work when the fire tax came up, it was coming rapidly. The county administrator and I, Matthew Heimel, he called up and let's get together, come to the office, and I'll explain to you what we're doing. And I came and I said, before we started, I said, have you had a chance to talk to cost yet? Oh, yes. We've been working with them, and I think it's going to be we're going to meet their criteria, and I think we're going to be able to get their support. Now, I know they didn't do 100% of what you wanted, but compromise.
They wanted a forever tax.
Yeah, well, yeah, but they didn't get it.
They didn't get it.
Let's open some questions right now.
Can I just finish the last part of that
please.
question?
Then
Okay,
we'll open a few questions.
so that was the model, and we went to the we worked with the Sausalito Marin City School District and said, let's do this on a per square foot basis with a very generous exemption for low-income seniors, just like what happened with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and they said yes, and we're endorsing it. Okay.
Carol. But Lil.
We're all going to have to disappear, and I was hoping that each of you would take one sentence, maybe two, to share with us what you'd like to be the result of this gathering.
Me.
Okay. I'm glad you asked that question. One thing that we would really like to have be the result of this gathering is that people in this room consider making a donation to our organization. We are at sensibletaxpayers.org. It also says on your handout that looks like this, how to donate. And what that donation will do is immediately is that we are trying to prioritize additional donations to getting out a mailer to as many people as we can through the county with our recommendations of how they should vote this fall, including yes on Measure L here in Mill Valley. And then other things that you can do to help us would be to, and I think to help yourselves, is to consider hosting an event like this, as Tom Dicker is a co-host today, to put together a list of people that might want to hear more about what's going on in the county and ways that they can be helpful. And we would love to meet with those groups and just kind of spread the word.
My sentence is really quick. The press sometimes is criticized for always being negative. Let me tell you, we should be negative sometimes. But sometimes when good things happen, we have to turn the other side and say, good job. Because that encourages and it gives a reward, basically, to do a good work. So punish the bad, reward the good. It's as simple as that.
Yep. And then also donations to us help cover, I mean, we have a lot of overhead as we get larger and we have more demands on us.
That gentleman there has a question.
Outreach to the Redwoods community.
For costs?
No, just presentations like this to the Redwoods.
Have you met with the Redwoods?
Not on this particular thing, but you should.
Would you like to? I'm going to. Yes. Would you like to come and do something at the Redwoods?
Oh, yeah.
Schedule, for sure.
Yeah. Would you both like to? I mean, I can set that up, right? We can do something there. They would appreciate that. So I've been known to spend a little bit of time at the Redwoods. So I think I can probably get you guys in there. So
well, can you get us in the wait? You can get us in the Redwoods?
I can get you in.
Wow.
Yeah, you can check in.
There are
and
other people in this room we can be helpful.
You think you're
too.
giving a presentation, and next thing you know, you get shown to your room.
My father was there, so.
So we will be doing this. So we are going to be, Caroline and I will be, together with 3 other candidates for city council, because there's an election coming up, are going to be at the Redwoods some October day, after the 7th. And we're going to be talking about the upcoming election, including Measure L. So we're going to be talking to everybody there about Measure L. And I just want to echo what Mimi said, which is, the most important outcome for us today. Well, there's 2 things. One, I hope that you feel like we are answering your questions and that we are being honest and transparent and, in good intention about what we're trying to accomplish in the city. That's the most important thing. But then we're also transaction-oriented. And so being transaction-oriented means that we need you to help get the word out on Measure L. That really is the key to this whole thing. So if you've got questions, let us know. If you'd like us to come to your house or visit with your neighbors, we are open. We like to do this. So we are happy to come and meet with you and talk to your neighbors and help get the word out. So just get in touch with us.
We're going to do more questions, but I just want to mention one thing to everybody. Cost this week, this coming Tuesday and Wednesday,
Yes.
is having 2 online candidates forums. And we invite everybody here to register. You go to
sensibletaxpayers.org
to register. On Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, I'll be moderating both debates. And the Tuesday night debate will be the 2 candidates running for supervisor in the Ross Valley, Brian Colbert and Heather McPhail-Sheridan. And both first-rate candidates. On Wednesday, we'll be doing the Marin Municipal Water District in Districts 2 and Districts 5, which is the 2 districts that are up this year. And we're happy to say all but 2 candidates have agreed to participate. Not the incumbent in District 5, Larry Russell, and a guy named Jack Kenny in District 2. I only mention that because we want to reward the good.
And in both instances, you don't live in the districts that are electing these people, but they're going to be making decisions that affect you. So you should be very interested in who these candidates are.
In answer to your question in some way, I think we want to continue this afterwards. This is one election cycle that we're in right now. Cross has taken positions on 10 measures, local measures, and 4 state measures. And we'll be
They're all in here.
Right. But it's not over, all right? We think there's a tax tsunami that's coming if Prop 5 passes. We think the next election We think regional measure 4 is probably going to come back. The BART tax is going to be. Guess what else is going to be? Smart tax. All right, they have a sunset on them 2029. Wildfire Prevention Authority has got their sunset provision 2029. They're probably going to go. All right, those are just. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of things.
There's maybe a regional transportation tax we talked about before. Hospital bond.
But I'm saying let's not just end this with the cycle. Let us continue to work together. We'd love to have you.
Any other questions? No?
Okay.
No?
We'll be here. Eat food.
Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to vote.